Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. I wanted to talk about a video that I was watching today while I was doing some work. And I had some thoughts about what was being said and just the general sentiment. And it was the Scott Pelley interview that he did with the New York Times. And it was his first interview since he was fired over at CBS 60 Minutes. And the things that he was saying, I just had some visceral reactions to, and not in a bad way, but I just had like some opinions that I just wanted to share before I go on my afternoon walk. So anyway, um, to give background, Scott Pelley was 60 Minutes correspondent for like 37 years. And he just recently, I think it was like last week, he was fired for being very outspoken about the way that things were being handled over at 60 Minutes after they were taken over by Paramount Skydance, and the Ellisons, who are Trump friendly. The son took over ownership of the company. He bought it from a previous owner, CBS. And his father, Larry Ellison, is like, I think he has surpassed Elon Musk with his level of wealth. He's in the billions. And so with that whole acquisition of CBS came Trump influence in the way that things were handled at CBS. So they let a slew of reporters go. The morning show looks very different, and it just trickled down to CBS. So that's what happened last week. Scott Pelley, he put himself out there to defend his coworkers, really, and to question the leadership, and that wound up resulting in the loss of his position. So I had very specific feelings about that whole situation because before I moved into events, I was the director of communications for a nonprofit organization. And I went to undergrad for media. And so media has a very special place in my heart. And I understand the importance of journalism. I understand the key pieces and the factualness of it all, and how important that is in America and for the world, and for just the way that people consume information. And the news and journalists are there to be a reliable source for the public to find out what's happening in the world, and in specifically in this country. A lot of people don't read. A lot of people don't subscribe to the paper anymore. I mean, papers are dying. Newspapers are dying. People aren't even really reading the newspapers over on the internet anymore. They're relying on social media to get their news. And so there are a lot of other influences in how people get their news. And there are a lot of maybe podcasters out there that report on the news, but they're not journalists. So they don't give it the same journalistic exercise that trained journalists do. So podcasters are considered media to some people that aren't aware that these people didn't go to school to learn journalism, and not to say that they don't have a good grasp of like how to tell both sides of a story, but they're not trained on it. And there is a specific way that you're supposed to present information to make sure it's fair and balanced. Unless you're given an opinion piece, which in fact is your opinion. But anyway, all that to say that media is very important. The First Amendment in our country is taken very seriously. And it's important that political influence does not seep into the way that the public consumes news. Because like Scott Pelley said on his interview with the New York Times, that democracy does not exist without journalism. And that's very true. And these journalists they are down in the trenches, and they are out on the front lines when things are going down, and we rely on them to tell the real story, the true story. And so from his perspective, he was being asked not to tell the real truth about the situation. And in specific, it was what happened out in Minnesota with Renee Good, in that situation where she was shot, and we all saw it with our own eyes. And that is what he was asking was to describe that situation in a different way. And I really encourage you to go and look at his video with the New York Times, because you'll see, and he explains what the situation was, what he was asked to do, what he was being asked to infuse into his story. He rejected that, and he didn't accept that, because when the public sees it for what it is, when there's video recording of what it is, you can't then infuse what President Trump's version of it was, or at the time, was it Kristi Noem or somebody came out and said a whole different set of events, and it wasn't even a whole 24 hours after that situation happened. They came out with a different set of events when everybody was like, well, I just watched it on television and I saw exactly what happened, and that's not what happened. So anyway, so he stood up for that. But, you know, I feel like I had a few takeaways from that interview. So the first takeaway was media is very important, and we're in a space in this country that we've never been in before, where we are dealing with AI and people not being able to tell what's real and what's fake as far as what's being put out there as news. And then we're having media companies, just like legacy media, being gobbled up and owned by billionaires. Like, who has ever in the history of the country seen where a CEO, like Amazon, like a situation with Jeff Bezos buying the Washington Post and then weighing in on how the Washington Post delivers the news and how and what they're going to do? And traditionally, they have had the independence to be able to report on the story and write in a different in the way that they saw it was fair and just. And here he is coming in there and asking them not to do what they have traditionally done, and it's just caused a lot of distrust with the media. So we're seeing that happening in our space, and really, it's like the erosion of media is happening before our eyes, and we're like the frog in the lukewarm water that the heat is getting turned up on. And it's like we're not realizing that we are about to be sitting in this boiling pot of hot water, which is our media being influenced in a way where most of the majority of the people aren't doing their own research and aren't really understanding where to go to find the right pieces of information and the right facts. So they're believing what they're hearing. They're believing what they're seeing from the news. And if that's being altered, then we're moving into a state-run type of situation. And I don't know if y'all paid attention in American history class, or in history class, but Russia has state-owned media. China has state-owned media, and the government controls what it is that people hear from the news. That's propaganda. That's infusing political ideology and leaning in something that should be very straight up. And so that's happening. But then on a whole nother topic, the way that Scott Pelley felt like the Barry Weiss, who is like, I guess, their top executive over at CBS News, that she and his new executive director, who, and I might be using these titles wrong because I didn't research their exact titles, but there was executive producer, I believe, who was fired like the week before this big meeting happened where Scott Pelley kind of stood up and showed out. So like a whole slew of people were fired. And so he was like, we were coming to the first meeting with them, with the executive team, and we were all sitting there waiting on an explanation of like why our coworkers got eliminated, and all the guy did was sit there and read a statement off of his phone, and it was just very insulting. And while I understand how maddening that must have been for them to have experienced their coworkers being let go, and these are people that they have been working with and in the trenches with for decades, and they have like sacrifice for each other. And he said at one extent, someone had saved his life. Like they were out in like the reporting on war, and somebody saved him from like being shot. So you can see the level of emotion that he had with discussing about what happened. And so he was expecting like a humanity and a human side of what happened and about the firings, and he didn't get that. And so that, I think that was part of what put the battery in his back to be going off in the way that he did in that meeting. And he was questioning the competence of his new executive producer, and like the main head up, Barry Weiss. He was questioning her capability for her job, and it was just a lot of like, okay, where do you get to do that? Like, first of all, when people get fired, it happens really fast. Usually there's no heads up on it all. And I could tell the story about how I worked a whole 13 years and 8 hours of a day, and then got called into the office and was given just like a couple hours to gather my belongings and like save stuff off the computer. And then that was it. And I got like, I think it was like a few weeks severance. And that was it. There was no heads up. There was no, I mean, but if you're keen and you're smart, you can kind of see the writing on the wall. And at the time I was so young that I didn't see like the performance review that was happening that didn't line up with anything I was ever evaluated on before. And all of a sudden, just the staff could never do anything quite to the level of what the director was asking for. And it was like, this has been working for over a decade. This team has been working, and all of a sudden now you're coming in and it's like what we've been doing just doesn't mean anything. So I mean, like, if you're paying attention, you're starting to see things happen. So I just have a hard time believing that when CBS was bought and the new executive team came in, that folks didn't have any idea that something like this was going to go down. And it's unfortunate because nobody thinks it's going to be them. And I hate that happened for them. And I hope financially that they were prepared for that. But that's just like a real message to everyone that they're not going to owe you any kind of explanation. It's most likely not going to happen, that they're going to give you a heads up. They're probably not going to stroke your back if your coworkers were axed or if you were axed. It's just not going to happen. And that's the way that it is out here in the work. And maybe because Scott Pelley had been working there for over 3 decades, that they had all built a community and a family together, and they treated each other with love and care and would have given each other that respect in a situation like that. But when new blood comes in, they don't care. And they're going to do what's in their best interest, and sorry for you. So that part of the interview, I was like, bruh, like, that's not, for those of us that have experienced that. And in my case, I experienced it twice in 2 years. Just layoffs, just corporate, being out in the corporate world. And the bottom line, the money was more important than my position. And that stuff happens. And so when he was talking like that, I was like, yeah, that's not how it happens, Scott. I'm sorry. But so anyway, and then the other thing that happened, the other takeaway that I have is that, like, with the emergence of AI, with the way the workforce is now and the way that businesses run, it's most important that people start looking at their careers and looking at their businesses, their business as personal branding. Like, these are the skills that I have, and this is what I'm putting out into the market. And whoever wants to buy or pay me for my skills, then that's how we're going to probably be moving towards as far as the job market is concerned. So I think we're kind of with AI taking over people's jobs and and how that's going to continue to be happening once companies are comfortable that AI is doing a sufficient enough job that they don't have to have a human being in those positions. I think now it's going to be people are going to have to be the new commodity in a real way of you're selling yourself and your package to businesses, to corporations. So it's almost like we're going to be entrepreneurs of our own skill set and put it out in the marketplace. And so less reliant on working for a company for 10, 15 years and retire like our, 20 and 30 years, like our parents did, the boomers and the early generation Xers, like that time is done. I don't know if we're ever going to see a time like that ever again in human history because we're so far along with technology and AI taking over that it's just going to be the new thing. Like you got to figure out what skills it is that you offer, that you can offer, put into the workplace, hone those skills and brand yourself and start making money. And actually it's better because your earning potential is bigger. And so that just, I don't know, it's better for us that we get on board with how we're moving and stop relying on these jobs to treat us like humans and stressing us out and all of that. So we just kind of take that over. So those are my thoughts about that situation at CBS. It's tragic. I hate that media is turning into what it is right now. I'm so thankful for independent media. So like all my faves that I used to watch on CNN, I don't watch that anymore. What? I don't watch Ms. Now, which used to be MSNBC. I don't watch that anymore. Now, all of those folks that they started axing one by one, and they've gone out onto like YouTube and other platforms like Substack to report on the real media in a way where those corporate media companies don't allow those anchors and those reporters to really report the news the way that we were used to trusting. Don Lemon and Joy Reid, Jim Acosta, they're all on the internet now. And so go subscribe to their channels, become a lemon head, become I forget what Joy calls her people, but that's what we're going to have to do now. So anyway, I hope you really look at those situations and don't be relying on these jobs to be your friend and your family, because they're not. They're a place for us to earn money and for us to go on about our good little business. So anyway, let me know what you think. Have you experienced being laid off? Doesn't it suck? Tell me about your stories. I hope that I'm not the only one out here that has really experienced that to the degree that I did. But I mean, I know I can't be alone. That's happening to all of us, so anyway, I hope you like this. Please like, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in the next video.